بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يعطيكم العافية وحذرا جميلا وبالله نستعين. نتأمل أنكم بخير. Okay, I'll talk today about the female reproductive system. Of course, we have here analogous structures very much similar to that in the male. It consists of the ovaries that are analogous to the testicles in the male. And then we have the conductive system, like the fallopian tube. We have the uterus, the vagina, in addition to certain accessory organs like the Bartholini glands, the vulva, and the breast. In this picture, you can see that the ovaries are actually in the lateral posterior abdominal wall. And you see the uterus that is posterior to the urinary bladder. And you can see the urethra and the vagina. And posterior to the urethra, we have what you call ischio-rectal pouch. The internal organs of the female, as I said, the ovaries are in the posterior abdominal wall, بينما the uterus is a pelvic organ in the non-pregnant stage, بينما the external organs, they lie below the urogenital diaphragm. All right, the ovaries, they are very much analogous to the testicles in the male, and actually, grossly, they look like an almond piece. With puckered surface, and these puckered surfaces resemble the holes that are present in the surface of the ovary, through which the mature ovarian follicle rupture, because that's how ovulation occurs. And they are attached to the back of the broad ligament of the uterus below the uterine tube. They are about 4 centimeters in length, 2 centimeters in width, etc. All right, and they are very much bounded above by the external iliac vessels and in front by the ureter. So these are the important anatomical relations. All right, the ovaries, they are attached, they have certain attachment. They are attached to the broad ligament by a short fold of peritoneum membrane. We call it the mesoovarium. And as usual, through these peritoneal folds, it is the path for the entrance of the blood vessels as well as nerves. The surface of the ovary is covered by what you call germinal epithelium, that is cuboidal type of epithelium. And the membranous covering of the ovary also, they are also connective, fibrous connective tissue, اللي هم التونيكا albuginea, which you will see that is also similar to that is present in the testicles in the male. So here you can see in the picture, the ovary over here, and the ovarian ligament, and the broad ligament that will bind the lateral aspect of the uterus also. You see the mesoovarium. So these are the important part of this picture. Now, the ovary in the female is the site of what you call oogenesis, just like the testicles in the male. But what is the difference here between the male and the female is that the female, during the intrauterine life, during the organogenesis period, that is the development of the organs, soon after developing of the ovary, the stem cells, which are the oogonia, they divide and give rise to several millions of primordial follicles. And then the first meiotic division begins. And then after that, in the metaphase of the first meiotic division, there is an arrest. And the further development of these primordial follicles is stopped over there. It remains dormant till after birth until puberty. So here is the difference between the male and the female. The male are born with stem cell spermatogonia. They are activated at puberty, and they are capable of giving rise to spermatocytes throughout life. بينما الفيميل is born with a fixed number of primordial follicle وليس oogonia. ولذلك every monthly cycle at puberty, 50 or so of those primordial follicles will undergo further development. So along the time, by the age of 45 or so, the female won't have any more primordial follicles. So that is what we call they reach the menopause. And of course, these ovaries, they produce the female sex hormone, that is progesterone, as well as estrogen. Now, the arteries, the blood supply of the ovary, they are from the ovarian artery, very much like the testicle, and the anastomose in the membranous portion, that is the mesosapiens, with the uterine artery. So there is anastomosis from the ovarian artery, from the abdominal, and the uterine artery. And this anastomosis, of course, to provide adequate blood supply to the ovary. The veins, they very much correspond to the artery. They are from the pampiniform plexus, or called the ovarian vein. And it formed that, these plexus form the ovarian vein. And the nerves, they are from the hypogastric or pelvic plexus and from the ovarian plexus. So here is a picture showing the arterial blood supply, the anastomosis between the branches of the ovarian artery and the uterine artery, because you will see that they, in addition to that, they will supply also the uterine tube and the upper portion of the uterus. The histology of the ovary, grossly, a section through the ovary will show that it is composed of an outer cortex and inner medulla. And as usual, the functional components that are the developing oocytes are present exclusively within the cortical region. The medullar region, it's got loose connective tissue with some blood vessels and nerves. Now, this here is a gross section. So you see over here what in the cortical region, these circles over there, they are actually oocytes in different phases of development. And here you will see the corpus luteum. We'll talk about it in a while. So here you see the oocytes in different developing phases and the actual developmental stages of the primordial follicle. Initially, the primordial follicle is lined by a single layer of a flat type of follicular cells. So that is the shape of the, all right. So here is a primordial ovicle in this slide. You can see that it is lined, the nucleus or the oocyte is lined by a single layer of follicular cell. And then due to the influence of follicular stimulating hormone and so, the primordial will go into the second phase of development, that the follicular cell will transform into simple cuboidal and it becomes stratified type of cuboidal epithelium surrounding the oocyte. This signifies the development of a primary oocyte, And then, as you can see in this figure, so the primordial follicle surrounded by flattened type follicular cell, the flattened cell become a simple cuboidal, stratified cuboidal. So from that point onward, there arise a fluid-filled cavities or follicular antrum, we call it. Now, once these follicular antrums appear, that signifies the development of secondary oocytes. And as you can see, the parts of these follicular cells, some of them will be surrounding the alveolar wall, the others where they connect to the alveolar wall, we call it cumulus operus, and there's a group of cells that surround the oocyte itself. We call it corona radiata. And these corona radiata will accompany the mature graphian follicle when it's ruptured from the surface, because they are very important to maintain the life of the oocyte for 1 day. So they provide structural and nutritional support. Now, the wall of the mature graphian follicle is what you call zona palisoida. So this is the outer membrane. It's a glycoprotein type of membrane. And of course, this type of membrane, during the process of fertilization, that is the interaction of the acrosomal part of the spermatocytes with the zona palisoida, after entry of a single spermatocyte, there occurs some certain of solidification of zona palisoida to prevent further entry of any other spermatocyte. All right, this is what we explained. All right, now after the release of the mature graphian follicle, the theca cells and the granulosa cells that were in place of the developing oocyte within the ovary, they become vascularized and transform into an endocrine tissue. And that is what we call the corpus luteum. So this corpus luteum will continue to produce the female hormone, that is the progesterone and the estrogen, till the formation of the placenta, which is going to take place after 2 months. Why is that? Because the endometrium, that's what we're going to talk about in a while, that line the wall of the uterus, where implantation takes place, we have to maintain the thickness. If the hormonal level falls, then there will be sloughing of that endometrium, which we call it a stratum functionalis. We'll talk about it in a while. So to maintain the thickness and the growth of this stratum functionalis, where implantation takes place, that is the function of the corpus luteum. So after the corpus luteum does its function and the placenta appear, it will undergo atrophic changes and it becomes called corpus albicans. Now, regarding atresia and apoptosis, you see the apoptosis, it is a process that physiological death that occur in several tissues, the body, in particular the reproductive organs. So apoptosis occurs along the population of the oocytes at different stages. Right from the beginning, as I said, that the female, initially the oodonia could give us up to 5 million of primordial follicles. Not necessarily all of them will survive. Only maybe 1% of them will survive. And finally, the female is born with about 400,000 instead of 5 million. So it seems to me that this cell, the apoptotic process, is essential to make sure that the other or the sister oocytes will complete their growth and development. There's no other explanation better than this. Now, the uterine tube, there are 2 in number, one on each side of the ovary, and they pass within the upper margin of the broad ligament and extend from the superior posterior aspect of the uterus to either side of the pelvis, overlooking the ovary. So there is no close contact between or attachment between the lateral part of the fallopian tube and the ovary. But we have there the infundibulum part, which we'll talk about it in a while. So let me pass on to the diagram over here. All right, so this is the fallopian tube. And as you can see, it's made of different parts. The isthmus, which is the narrowest part, that is the entry to the uterine cavity. Then we have the ampullar region. The ampullar region, actually, it's the widest and the most folded pattern of mucosa that is present within the fallopian tube. And obstetric and gynecologists believe that the perfect folding pattern of the mucosa provide adequate chambers for the oocyte to be fertilized in. That is where the spermatocyte meet the oocyte in the ampullar region. Then you have the infundibulum. In the infundibulum, you have these fimbria, ahdab. Those fimbria, they overhang the ovary. And once the mature Graafian follicle rupture through the surface of the ovary, it's going to be sucked in through these fimbria into the fallopian tube, and it will pass due to the peristalsis movement of the smooth muscle of the fallopian tube, in addition to the presence of cilia. That is the lining epithelium of the fallopian tube. So it is a ciliated type of epithelium. And as you know, the cilia will help to push and move the oocyte within the fallopian tube. All right, the fallopian tube, each of them is about 10 centimeters long. And as I said, it's got different three parts: isthmus, ampulla, and infundibulum. I spoke about that already. All right, we spoke about that. Now, the histology of the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is a tube. It's made of essentially three layers: the mucosa, the muscular layer, in addition to the outer serosal layer. Now, the inner layer, the mucosa, the surface layer is a ciliated type or columnar type of epithelium. And as I said, we have cilia over there, and the cilia help to propagate or move the mature Graafian follicle within the fallopian tube, in addition to the peristalsis movement. And here is to remind you, and that is we'll talk about in a while, that certain physical agents or chemical, like smoking, it causes dwarfism of the cilia in the respiratory system. It causes dwarfism in any cilia or anywhere in the body, even in the fallopian tube. وطبعا الختياريات بيعرفوا هذا الكلام، بس يتجوز ابنها وبعد ما يمر 4 5 6 اشهر بلاقينها جاراتها يا غبصه ابنك حملت ما حملت، بعدين بتقول لها والله انا بتدخن، يعني فديروا بالكم. All right, so this is the section of the oviduct or fallopian tube. So we have the outer layer that is serosa. Of course, it's a connective tissue. And then underneath that, we have the muscular layer, as usual, smooth muscle, inner circular, outer longitudinal, that provide peristalsis movement. And then we have the folding pattern. And I think here is this, you see several folding pattern. This is from the ampullar region. And with the magnified section over here, you see the cilia, columnar epithelium, ciliated cell. You have other pixels which are not ciliated, and underneath that we have the lamina propria. So this is what I talked about, the fertilization وقصة الختياريات والحماة والعمة وإلى آخره. All right. Now, another clinical aspect that could occur, that sometimes due to some problem and the oocyte does not move from the ampullar region to the uterine cavity after fertilization, the pregnancy continue over there, and in regard to the small size or small lumen of the fallopian tube with the growing fetus, then the female will complain of amenorrhea, that انقطاع الدورة الشهرية, ولكن at the same time it will complain of pain on the sides of the lower abdomen and possibly increase in size. And that is what you call the ectopic gestation or ectopic pregnancy. All right, the uterus. All right, we spoke about that. All right, the uterus, it is a pear-shaped organ, a hollow organ, highly muscular. It lies posterior to the urinary bladder, as I said before, and it is a pelvic organ. And it's got certain parts above the entry of the fallopian tube. We call it the fundus. And you see, this is a general terminology. As you remember, the stomach below the entry of the esophagus, that part is called the fundus. It's the same pattern over here, the uterus below the or over the entry of the fallopian tube, you call it the fundus. Then we have the body, and we have a certain constriction in the middle, we call it the isthmus. and below that we have the cervix. And usually the apex is directed downward and backward. And this is what you call introverted direction of the uterus. We'll talk about that in the clinical aspects. So here is a picture of the uterus. As you can see, the fundal portion, the uterine cavity, the main body, and the cervix. And of course, the cervix, you have the internal O's and external O's, which are very small openings, a few millimeter, and the projected portion of the cervix into the vagina. And these angles are called the fornices, fornix, anterior fornix, posterior fornix of the uterus. So it's about 7.5 centimeter in length, 5 centimeter in breadth, nearly 5 centimeter in thickness. إلى آخره. It's composed of the fundus, the isthmus, the body, and the cervix. And this is the usual anatomical position. As I said, the introverted direction of the uterus. Sometimes this direction is sort of reversed and it becomes projecting backward. And this is called retroverted. And this usually occurs sometimes following unmanaged delivery, let me say. The anterior surface of the uterus is covered by peritoneum and also the posterior surface. إلى آخره. The lateral meninges, where you have the entry of the uterine tube. And below and front, we have the round ligament of the uterus, which is fixed, and the broad ligament, which is a folded peritoneum. And these are reflected on the margin of the uterus to the wall of the pelvis. So they are ligaments that are attached to the uterus because the uterus is fixed in position or by ligaments. We'll talk about more on that. We spoke about the cervix. The ligamental support of the uterus, we have first the round ligament, which is a fibrous and muscular tissue. It's present anterior to the fallopian tube, and it extends laterally across the external iliac vessel, enter the inguinal ligament canal, and is inserted in the labia majora. So in a while, we'll talk about this, and that is the pain that is described in labor. That's why the female are also to the sacrum. We'll see now the other ligament, the uterosacral ligaments. Now, this is also provide cervical support. It originated from the posterior cervical part and around the rectum, and it turned out to be attached to the fourth, to the fifth sacral vertebra. And that is why during pain labor, during the dermatomes and all these things, actually most of the pain in the female is referred to the lower back. And that is why due to this attachment and the passage of the nerves in the inside. A broad ligament, we said that it is a double reflection of the peritoneum over the round ligament. We spoke about that. Now, the vessels and the nerves. The artery that supply the uterus, they are from two sources. The uterine artery from the hypogastric and the ovarian from the abdominal. Remember, I said that when I spoke about the arterial supply of the ovary, and we said parts of this anastomosis actually they supply the uterine tube in addition to the uterus. The veins also correspond to the artery, and they end in very extensive uterine plexuses. And of course, the lymphatics follow the course of the artery. The nerve, they are derived from the hypogastric and ovarian plexuses and form the third and fourth sacral nerves. The histology of the uterus. The uterus, as I said, it's made of essential three layers. We have the, from inside, we have the endometrium, and then we have the myometrium, and then we have the external layer, which is the serosa. Now, the endometrium is lined by a surface epithelium, simple columnar epithelium, in addition to the presence of the what you call the uterine glands that are embedded in the thick stroma. That is stroma. When we say stroma, we mean connective tissue underneath the epithelial tissue, underneath the surface epithelial tissue. The myometrium is muscular layer, a smooth muscle, and it is very thick. And as I spoke about smooth muscle in the first year, if you remember, that one of the main properties of smooth muscle is the ability to undergo hypertrophic and hyperplastic changes. For example, in the uterus, as the fetus grows, you need the wall of the uterus to become thicker in order to be able to support the structure of the uterus. So there will be an increase and enlargement of the size of the smooth muscle cell. In addition to that, remember when we spoke about the other characteristic of smooth muscle, we said that the smooth muscle has got in certain sites gap junction like cardiac muscle. Why? Because during the birth, you need the upper portion of the uterus where the fundus is, the smooth muscle over there to contract, and on the other side, toward the canal, toward the cervix, you need the smooth muscle over there to undergo relaxation so that it enables the passage of the fetus. We spoke about the mucosal gland, and all right, the other aspect is that the endometrium. This endometrium, in fact, is influenced by the same hormones that stimulate the development of the oocyte. So at the same time, the oocyte is developed, and by the time it's reached the maturity stage, mature ovarian follicle, by that time, the same hormones, follicular stimulating hormone, has stimulated the endometrium lining the uterus to grow thicker. So we have two layers. That is the stratum basilis and the stratum functionalis. So the stratum basilis is the usual endometrium that is present in the uterus. But to prepare for the possible fertilization and pregnancy, we have to grow the endometrium, and that growth, we call it the stratum functionalis. So what is there in the stratum functionalis? Increase in the number of the glandular tissue and the surrounding connective tissue. With the increase in the blood supply, and the blood vessels will become spiral because they are limited within that layer. And if pregnancy does not take place, this layer, which is called stratum functionalis, as you can see down here in the third diagram, this stratum functionalis will slough off due to, of course, decreased values of the female hormone, that is basically the progesterone and estrogen. That is why I remember when I said the function of the, let me remember, all right, the corpus luteum, all right? The corpus luteum, which we said that it will secrete the hormone to maintain the thickness of the endometrium till the formation of the placenta. All right, now a clinical application of the uterus is very important. You see at the junction in this diagram, at the junction of the cervix with the vagina. So we have a transition from simple columnar epithelium in the cervical canal into stratified type squamous epithelium in the vagina. And that junction usually is the most common site for carcinogenic transformation. And that scientists have discovered a very simple way, what we call a cytological exam, and just take a swab from that region and subject it to this pap smear exam, what we call it, papilocoli, and that can easily identify early carcinogenic transformation. So if you can diagnose it early, then the treatment is much better. The retroverted uterus, we told that. So it is a tilted type of uterus, and the direction, instead of being projecting forward, it's going to project forward, and that's called retroverted type of uterus, and usually it causes discomfort and abdominal pain. That's the picture of the introverted with several degrees, first degree, second degree, third degree, etc. The vagina is a fibromuscular chokehold, and it starts from the cervical projection into the vagina down to the vulva. It measures about 7.5 to 9 centimeters from the anterior or posterior aspect. And of course, we have the posterior fornix and anterior lateral fornixes. That is where the projection of the cervix in the vagina. And its relation, the anterior surface is very much related to the fundus of the urinary bladder and the urethra. The upper 1/4 of the posterior surface is separated from rectum by rectouterine pouch. And the mid to fourth is related to the rectovesical fascia that's separated from the urinary bladder. The lower fourth is separated from the anal canal by the perineal body. And the sides are enclosed by the levator ani muscle. So these are the important relations of the vagina. Now, the structure of the vagina, and in fact, the labia minora, they are erectile type of tissue, very much similar to the erectile tissue that is present in the corpora cavernosa in the male. Histologically, it's made of the usual 3 layers: mucosa, muscularis, and adventitia. The mucosa is formed by a surface epithelium, a stratified squamous epithelium, to provide certain protection. Underneath that, as usual, we have some connective tissue. And then we have the muscularis layer, inner circular, outer longitudinal of smooth muscle are present over there, with some striated muscle, where we have in the bulbospongis muscle, which forms a sort of a sphincter around the vagina. And then the adventitia, which is a type of connective tissue. You can see these structures within this section. The accessory organ in the female, and that is the mammary gland. The mammary gland, a modified type of sweat gland in the skin. And as I said before, the same hormone that affect the development of the oocytes as well as the endometrium, they affect also the growth of the glandular tissue in the mammary gland in the female. And these glands are of branch alveolar gland. Remember when we talk about the alveolar arrangement of the glandular tissue of the epithelium, we said that we have the epithelial cells, cuboidal or rounded, surrounding a central lumen that is wide. That's why we define it as alveolar, which is larger than the acinar, remember that. And each duct will secrete the milk through a duct. Each alveolus secretes the milk through a duct, and that is called lactiferous ducts. And all those lactiferous ducts join together and form lactiferous sinus at the nipple. That is where all lactiferous, all tubule open in the nipple. And of course, because you need ejection of the milk, you have certain presence of myoepithelial cells around that structure. All right. In fact, there must be, I will add that section, it's not here, of the alveoli of the mammary gland. So that is the end of the lecture, and wish you all the best.